like usually, you know, when we understand a bit more about society, about ourselves, and we feel like we have been on a path in a way, and we feel restless on some degree, it can be a big thing. It can be also a very subtle thing in life, where we realize, you know, something is off. Like life is not supposed to be, let's say, like, you know, we have a lot of emotions or we suffer or something, and you know, we feel like there's more to life than what we usually think. And when we are on this path of, like, some people would call it, you know, self-improvement or self-development or just understanding ourselves better or spirituality or whatever, when we're on that path, uh, we can also, there's many people who, let's say, meditate for 20 years and they're still seeking and seeking something, happiness or enlightenment, and somehow it feels like this search is not going anywhere. And so, you know, through the years I've been interested in this topic since I think I'm 14 or even younger, and I was first looking for my answers because I always felt like there's some lack or something is off, and I always looked first for my answers in philosophy. As a young boy, I remember, like, my father had this book called Sophie's World, and I was reading in that. It's sort of a bunch of philosophers talking about life, and I didn't find my answers back then and there. Then I went to psychology. I didn't find my answers there, and then I saw a few books, and something resonated very deeply. One was about quantum physics, and one about non-duality. And we speak about non-duality here, and it's not anything like what we're speaking about here has nothing to do with beliefs or with religion or with, I wouldn't even say spirituality as such, and also actually not self-improvement or anything, because non-duality, it just means not two. And it's, I mean, it has some kind of tradition, but I actually don't care about that tradition at all. It's just something that I found over the years that resonates, or let's say comes closest to that what I resonate with. And it means not two, and it means that usually we go through the world and say, I'm Benjamin, I'm the subject, and there's many objects, there's others around. And that's basically what we do, is we separate ourselves as this body mind, and we separate us from the world. And that, in my eyes, is the cause for most of the suffering that's out there, that I have experienced and that I see around. So the problem, in a way, is not the world or what's happening in the world or society or our parents or our history, but in a way, if you want to have, let's say, there is a challenge, it's much more to do with what we identify with and with what we believe who we are, and especially who we are not. Because I think strongly from my experience that, in a way, I would even say all problems stem from the points that we are identified with something that we have nothing to do with. So I work a lot with analogies. So one of the analogies I usually I use often is, we, like, there's a screen, and there's a movie being played on the screen. And you know, in the movie you have a lot of action and emotions, and a lot of things are happening, and there's action figures, and one action figure would be Benjamin, one action figure would be Marie, one action figure would be Michaela, and many others, billions of them. And we identify with one of them, and we go through the wall and say, oh, everything is happening to this action figure. and and because that's an action figure in that movie, a character. But if you look at, and if we do that, if we are identified with this character, and it's sort of happening by default, when we don't examine, when we don't question the status quo of everything, this is sort of the default. And then what happens is we see the world as everything is happening to us, the good stuff and the bad stuff. But I think that's the core of the issue of a lot of suffering, because it feels like something is completely off. Why? Because from my experience, I can see I'm not that character. I'm not Benjamin. And it sounds really weird when you hear it as the character that you're listening to from, if you identified it as it. But it doesn't sound weird at all when you're seeing it from the screen, right? And from the screen, as I said, and this analogy, we are not the action figure in the movie, but we are the screen. And so, for instance, no matter what happens in the movie, if there's explosions happening or if there's strong emotions happening or anything, the screen is never affected by it ever. And that's what we are, because some of us, we believe that, like, it has a lot to do with identity, right? Some of us, we believe we are identified with the history, with the events that happened to us, with, I don't know, with the parents that we had, with the country we grew up. That has all an impact on the body mind, as Benjamin or Marie, but this has nothing to do with who we are. And I'm not speaking about in a way a wishful thinking or one day you can be like this, but what I see is this has always been like this, and it will always be like this, and it's always like this right now, because it's not even it doesn't even happen in time. It's a timeless space that we are. And what I've also learned over the years is that it doesn't take us, very far if we speak about what we are, the screen, to the action figure, because the action figure would take that and say, oh wow, one day I can become a screen. But this is not what we're talking about here. What I learned is it's better to talk about what we're not from the perspective of the screen and going to the screen. So meaning, um, because in some yogic circles or meditation circles, there's nothing wrong with meditation yoga, but in many of these circles, people, they feel like they have to just show unconditional love and speak in a certain way and behave in a certain way. But this has nothing to do with what we're talking about, because all of that has all to do with the action figure, with Benjamin or all this stuff. But it has nothing to do with who we truly are. There's the saying of what's perceiving cannot be perceived. So basically what I'm saying, the screen, the reality that we are, it has no form. And that's why it's so hard to grasp for us. I'm sure all of you guys who are joining here, you have some kind of resonance with something, that there's more to this than just this body mind. And for me, it's very clear that what we are is formless. It cannot be defined. It cannot be spoken about. Like, I'm not religious, but in some religions, like I think in the Bible somewhere, it says God has no face. And that's what I think in a way. That's my experience, that what we are, it cannot be defined. It cannot be grasped. It has no form. It's like when you have, imagine your tongue was made of salt, and I put salt on your tongue, you wouldn't taste anything, because the same cannot capture the same. And it's the same thing. So we can only, sort of be aware or perceive objects and everything that's happening, because we're this emptiness. We are formless. Only because of that, this is possible. And so, yeah, that's sort of one of the basic analogies that I use a lot. So what happens a lot is we believe we are in something that we can never be in, and we want to get out of something that we can never be out of. And what I mean by that is, we believe we are this action figure, and as that action figure, we have to find a relief, or we have to be freed. But that's a big, like, I think that's one of the biggest confusions in spirituality, exactly that. And I usually use the analogy of the symbolism of the cross. It's like there's a book, I think by René Guénon, who wrote a book about the symbolism of the cross. It's very complicated, but to make it very simple, it's very strong and powerful. You have the horizontal and the vertical, right, of the cross. So on the horizontal, it's basically the becoming process. So it's in time and in space. So what happens is we identify with something in time. So this body mind is born and it will die, and something in between happens. And in a way, what we're saying is that we feel a lack, and then we think by becoming something, so by acquiring a new house, by acquiring a car, by getting a new job, by getting a new boyfriend, by, I don't know, chasing some kind of carrot that is in front of us, we believe that we can fulfill this lack that we're feeling. But everything we're doing in order to fill that lack, it's actually pushing us deeper into that lack without noticing. So, you know, it's like almost like an addiction. So, right, if somebody, or like, you know, you don't even have to go to drugs. Even if you eat sugar, let's say you eat sugar or chocolate, and if you feel like if you eat it every day, there feels like there's some kind of urge to eat it every day. And if you stop eating sugar or carbs or whatever, you stop having this urge. And it's a bit like this. You sort of dig a hole deeper and deeper when you try to fill that lack and you try to find happiness by doing something. And I would say this is something that's going on for every action figure on some level. For some, it's a career. For some, it's relationships. For some, it's spirituality even. You know, there's many things. And then so that's what's happening on the becoming axis. And then there's the vertical, and the vertical axis is basically being. And that's a being that is not of time and not of space. That's basically our natural condition, which is not even a condition because a condition would come and go. But this is something that's always so. So this becoming process is happening within that being that's always present. And we are this vertical, that presence, but this becoming is happening within that presence, within this being. And what we try to do, so the biggest confusion that I see that is out there is, as this becoming, being identified with this becoming process, we try to become the being. But this will never be possible because we already are the being. So the more we try to become this being, the more we sort of seemingly go away from where we already are. It's like Ramana Maharshi. Maybe some of you know him. He made an amazing statement exactly along those lines. He said, presupposing the existence of a non-existing thing, and I will go slower in that. So presupposing the existence of a non-existing thing, and then looking for salvation for that non-existing thing through the means of self-improvement and yoga and meditation. If we do that, doesn't it mean that we just reinforce that non-existing thing? So that summarizes it, I think, in an amazing way. So let's go step by step. So he's saying presupposing, and that's a very important word because we constantly presuppose that we are someone. So I'll give you one example. So for some reason, we believe that, like I give you an example with the moment. So someone comes to you and says, hey, I can show you how to get into the moment. And you'll be like, wow, this is amazing. I know so many benefits about being more present, being more in the moment. And then you will be like interested all of a sudden, you know, you would be interested in going to retreats about being more in the moment. You would start reading books, how to get into the moment. And if you read that book, you'll be like, oh yeah, I feel like I'm getting there, but I'm still not there. Then you read the book, how to get really into the moment. Then you read this book, but you sort of feel guilty that you probably didn't read it good enough, or, you know, maybe you failed. And then you read another book, how to get really, really into the moment, and then it still fails you. So you try everything to get in the moment, and you almost become obsessed with it in some way. And that doesn't go anywhere. So that actually keeps you further and further away from where you already are. The solution to that is not to buy into the idea that it's possible not to be in the moment, because it's not possible ever not to be in the moment. Because, you know, that's what I explained earlier with the vertical. So we are what we are, and this is it. And everything else is taking place there. So the solution always is prior to us buying into a belief or us believing we are someone. So if, as I said, if someone comes and says, hey, I can show you how to get in the moment, you'll be like, instead of saying, oh, wow, that sounds so amazing, show me how to do it, you'll be like, you recognize in that moment and say, oh no, I can never be out of the moment. So you lose interest in all of this. You lose interest in spirituality. You lose interest in self-improvement. You lose interest in all of this naturally, because you can see through that it's not possible not to be the absolute. And, you know, in my eyes and experience, this is what's the strongest and in a way, the last answer to so many, I don't know, challenges and objectives and goals that we have. And yeah, that's basically the message that we have here. And I give you another example is what I've been using recently is about, let's say there's many people that are in Paris, and everyone is obsessed with going to Paris. So they buy maps, they buy nice cars, and they hire airplanes and so on. And they're so obsessed, they all want to go to Paris because it's like everybody speaks about it. And uh, and they don't realize that they are already in Paris. And you know, when you're outside, when you see this story or this analogy from the outside, it seems ridiculous, right? It seems like, what, are they stupid? Like, they are in Paris, but they want to go to Paris. Like, it doesn't make any sense. But this is exactly what's happening in the, let's say, in this world that we call world. Is we want to be enlightened, we want to be free, and we don't see we are already free. So, and why is that? Because not because we're not free, but because we have bought into ideas and beliefs and conditionings that we are not free, because we have identified with this character in the movie. And yeah, that's basically, you know, the whole story of this. So the answer, because if you take this example of Paris, if you, as soon as you buy into the idea you're not in Paris and you really want to go to Paris, you will be on a lifelong path, and you will never get there because it's not possible. You can never get to Paris when you're in Paris. The only way, let's say, to realize you're in Paris is by realizing that you have never been out of Paris. Like, you know, it would be as if somebody comes and let's say you're on the search to go to Paris, and then somebody comes and says, hey, you stupid, you're already in Paris. And you will be like, what kind of weird person is that? Like, it's impossible. I know all the other people who have a high reputation and they have a high societal stand. They were like, they're all saying, no, it's really important to go to Paris. And so it's about no longer listening and believing, you know, to those thoughts that make us believe that we are in Paris. And it sounds very simple, and it is very simple, but it sounds very hard when we put our trust into all of those 70,000 thoughts that are happening every day, and we put our trust there. And then we end up being in Paris and wanting to get to Paris, and we don't see the how absurd that is, because everyone around us in our circle is trying it as well. And that's sort of the insanity that's happening every day. And as I said, I love the analogy because it's very simple, and it shows how obvious and how closed our eyes are by hearing the sentence, oh, I'm already enlightened. Not as Benjamin or as this action figure, but as the screen. The screen is always enlightened. No explosion in the movie, nothing will ever shake that. And that's important. And then, you know, you may say, oh, but it does, I feel like it's not just a thought that I'm not enlightened or that I'm not free or however I want to live, but it's also a feeling, right? It's like a sense. And exactly, like this, you know, what we call ourselves sometimes, it's a sense of self. And this, because it's not a real thing, it's just a sense or a feeling or a thought, but it's never a real thing, it never actualizes. And that's the beauty, because it's enough to no longer listen to all those messages and beliefs. And I like, you know, this example, for instance, like, take something that's very close to us. Let's take thoughts, for instance. So we grow up, and usually we are so identified with thoughts that we believe we are thoughts. That it's like impossible for us to create a distance between what we are and thoughts. It's like we're like one with them. So that means the nature of thoughts is to be positive and negative. It's like an up and down. Sometimes those cycles are longer, sometimes shorter. But when that happens, is we are basically enslaved to the thought system, because whatever the thought does, that's how we feel. And that's not healthy at all, because, as I said, the nature of thoughts is to be positive and negative. But so some of us, who are, let's say, on some kind of path of meditation or yoga or reading books or whatever, sometimes, we manage to see, there's a space between, oh, I'm not my thoughts. So I'm able to observe thoughts as an observer, but I'm not the thoughts. So I can see they come and go, and I'm not the thinker. And that's a very important concept in a way, is to understand thoughts are not from and about me, and I am not the thinker of thoughts. It's like some tribes, when there's rain happening or some weather's happening, they have to have like a person who's responsible for the weather. And for us, knowing, let's say, the signs of the weather, we're like, no, there's not a rainmaker, or there's not someone who lets the sun shine. It just happens. But in the same way, when it comes to thoughts or words or even the body-mind system, we think there has to be like someone in there, like a control center. But even neuroscientists today, they know that you can open the body and see everything, but there's no center. The center is fabricated by the mind. So let's go to something that's very simple for us to see, like thoughts. So as I said, some of us, they may be like, these thoughts are very sticky, and for some of us, there's an opening. So we are able to observe thoughts, but we're not identified with thoughts, or we're not lost in them. And when we are able to do that, we're able to sit there and see, okay, thoughts that just come and go. That's their nature. And there seems to be something in us that tries to interfere with thoughts. And then it gets sort of sticky. But what happens is, when you just observe them, you see that they just come and go, and they're not from you and not about you. Because imagine you were the thinker of your thoughts, then it would be the easiest thing to do would be to think anything you want at any given time, right? Because if you were the thinker of thoughts, you would be before thoughts, you would be before and after thoughts, and thoughts would be your product. Like a baker in a bakery, he's the baker, and the bread and the rolls and everything is the product. So if that was the case, if you were the thinker, it would be very logical that you could think any thought you want. You could also decide not to think anything for days, for hours, for whatever. That would be the case. But is that the experience that we have? Is that your experience? No, it's not. Like, there are thoughts coming and going, and when we see that, it's actually, at first it seems like, oh shit, but I'm not in control of thoughts. But no, that's actually freedom, to see that you're not in control of thoughts, and thoughts have nothing to do with you. If you were not able to control thoughts, and thoughts were from you or about you, that would be a disaster. But you will see that you're not able to control thoughts, and they're not from you and about you, so it doesn't matter. That's freedom. We are only so obsessed with trying to control thoughts because we believe they're about us and from us. That's the only reason why we're interested in them. There's no other reason. It would be like, imagine you drive a car like on Highway 1 on the coast of California, and you drive a car, and then there's on the radio, they speak about the weather, they speak about, I don't know, other stuff, and there's nice music. And imagine all of a sudden they would speak about you, and they would tell you everything you have done, and the good things and the bad things. You were like, oh my god, shit, what's happening? It's about me, it's about me. And you would get freaked out in some way, because you were like, oh, hopefully they're not going to talk about my dark past and stuff. And that's exactly what's happening. That would be exhausting for you on a mental level. But this is exactly what's happening every day with 70,000 thoughts. And we're constantly trying to calm them down, or try to stay out of trouble and this kind of stuff. But you see, I don't know, 20 years of meditation, 20 years of yoga won't take you much, won't improve much your, let's say, trying to be calm, because the problem is not the thoughts, but in that case, the problem would be that you believe they are from you and about you. And the final answer to that is to see that they have nothing to do with you. And that's, yeah, otherwise, as long as you have interest in thoughts and you believe they are very relevant to your life or what's happening, you will be always, obsessed with them. That's just a natural thing. But the trick, in a way, is to see that they have nothing to do with you, and that's freedom for me. Yeah, and then there's also this whole topic of control. So, for instance, we believe in a way that, or we pretend like we are in control of so many things that are happening in our lives. If we get a job, if we get married, if we, I don't know, if something happens, something nice, something bad, we take so much responsibility. We feel so much pride, but also so much guilt, because we believe we have everything to do with everything that's happening. And I don't see that, because that's also exhausting. So what I see is that, here's a comment on Instagram from me member. This is no free will. So I'll come to that in a second. So I'll just give this example. So let's take something else that's very close to us. Let's say the body. So somehow, when we don't reflect or we don't examine, we believe we have like so much control over our body. But if you really examine and really look how much control we have over our body, let's say free will, you come to the conclusion that it's very close to zero. Like, just take your body, for example. Like, there's so many functions happening in your body. There's digestion, there's the liver doing its thing, there's a heart pumping blood, there's cells being split. How much free will or choice do you have every day for all of these, I don't know, millions of functions that are happening? If we were in control of our bodies for 2 minutes, I think we all would die within a few minutes, because we would forget to pump the heart, we would forget to split some cells. This would be completely insane. We would all fall off. And so this is insane, right? When you see that, it's so obvious, but we pretend. There's like this, pretending that we are like amazing beings that are in control of everything, and then we feel guilty for shit we have nothing to do with. Like, like there's even a language in English, and maybe in other languages, I hurt my knee. I did something and I hurt my knee. It means, like, it sounds like you took the hammer and you just, banged on your knee and you hurt it. So that's how, like, the languages and how we pretend like what we do. It's completely insane, and we never like examine it. It's like, yeah, that's sort of the life we live, and then we complain that we have so many worries, and I don't know, that life is really hard and so on. Yeah, of course. If you take responsibility for stuff that you have nothing to do with, of course life is hard. And so what I mean here is, it's a very obvious and it's a very simple solution, and it feels like, it's, imagine like a rope, and there's many knots, and there's one big knot, and let's say you have many small knots. The small knots would be like, I don't know, I had a drama in my childhood, I don't know, I don't like my boss, or I don't like my wife, or I don't like my brother, or whatever. And then there's a big knot, which basically is, oh, I'm identified with this action figure Benjamin. And and when we're able to solve this big knot, all the small ones, they will dissolve like this. It's very simple and obvious. But what we're trying to do usually is, because we never question the who we truly are. We never even dare to question it, and because we are in it. That's the thing. Like, so imagine you were, like what I mentioned earlier. Imagine you were in Paris and you didn't know you were in Paris, and you were obsessed with going to Paris. If I came to you and I said, hey, you are already in Paris. What are you doing? you know, you would be like so defensive. You would be like, my God, like I don't want to even speak to you. That's totally ridiculous what you're doing, right? That's sort of the answer you would give, and that's sort of the mind that the answer that would give. So if you have now, if I say, for instance, what you are is is not just enlightened. It's like it's the light itself. What you are right now is the light itself. It's the absolute. There's no force. There's nothing that's bigger, higher, stronger than you. You would, if you have any doubt and you would have any thoughts that come and say, that's, come on, that cannot be possible, then you're exactly like that person who is in Paris saying, oh my God, come on, that's ridiculous. Exactly like that. So, but because, why is that? Because we don't hear it as to screen this message, but we hear it as the action figure. And the action figure is stuck in the becoming process. That's the root of this problem. Because if the action figure says, oh yeah, I'm just an action figure, I have nothing to do with the absolute on a relative level, then it would give up, it would surrender to the screen and be like, yeah, okay, that's it. And the other example is the blue sky. You know, you can also say, you know, we identify with so many clouds all the time, but what we are is the blue sky. And no cloud, no thunderstorm, no rain, no airplane has ever left a mark in the sky, ever. And if you look at the blue sky, it's just an appearance. When we look from Earth to the blue sky, it seems blue. But guess what? The further you explore it, the more you will see it's just space. It's not even blue, because the blue just comes from a certain angle that you look at it. But it's just space, it's empty, it's nothing. And that's what we are. We are nothing. And empty and formless. It's the absolute. There's nothing bigger, nothing better. Right now, we're like, we're swimming in paradise, full on, and most of us, we're complaining that life sucks, or like, you know, we're suffering. But it's ridiculous. What is the discrepancy between that? Is beliefs, and they're unconscious, and they are, those beliefs are so strong, they're repeated every day in the thought system. So you're sitting in paradise and you pretend like you're like a little mouse, and your life sucks, and that's the story. That's what's happening. It's just, as I said, if you hear that story like this, you're like, yeah, you were like, oh yeah, of course, that's crazy. But the crazy thing is that, you know, when you're in it, you don't see it. You would even defend it, say, no way, but I'm not like this. Maybe all the others, yeah, yeah, all the other in spirituality, yeah, they are, I see that how they are, but I'm not. But yes, that action figure as well. So it's, what's important is that, you know, usually we look at the world like from here, from the perspective of Benjamin, and we believe that what's looking through the eyes is who we are. Like, not even that. It's like the body mind. So there's something that's looking through the eyes, facilitating the perception, and we are falling in love with the body mind because we think it comes from there. It's like, imagine imagine you get a love letter from someone, and the mailman gives you the love letter, and then you read it, and you then, next time you see the mailman, you just fall in love with the mailman because you think it came from him. It's like that. So this body mind is a facilitation of, you know, the perception system of what you are. You are the formless, and the formless is the seeing. It's seeing, it's using the body mind as a facilitation, and we pretend like we're this facilitation, you know, and yeah, and that's it. And then we feel like, oh, we're born and we will die at some point, and life is very hard because there's so many problems. But those are just happening. It's like all of this is just like a dream world. uh, and we would say it's an illusion because it's just appearances. It has no reality on its own. So I'll give you one other thing. So, you know, usually there are, there are, let's say, an object, let's say a table, and I go through like a 3-step process of, let's say, reality in that. So let's say there's a table. If I asked you, what do you know about a table, or how do you know this table exists? What do you refer to? You would refer to like the perception of it, right? You would refer to the seeing of the table, the touching, maybe even the smelling the wood, but you would refer to your perception system. So everything you know about the table is by using your senses. So if I asked you then and asked, hey, have you ever been aware, like, have you ever, I don't know, known a table by not using your sense perception? I would have to say no, because I have never directly experienced a table without using my sense perception. That means, wouldn't it be true then to say that this table is not that this table exists, or that that I'm perceiving a table, but that the table only exists within the perception. The table has no reality on its own, because it needs the sense perception to exist. I have never known a table without using sense perception. That means the table has no reality on its own. I need sense perception to be aware of it. So that's the first step. So that means if I asked what is the table made of, it's not made of matter, because it's not something that exists, but it's made of perception. And then you go one step further back, and then I ask, okay, how do you know you perceive? Because that's coming before, right? There's a perceiving, there's a table, but how do you know you perceive? And the answer would be, because I'm aware. I'm aware that I'm perceiving. So you have awareness, you have perceiving, you have a table. So then, if you ask the question again, what's the substance of that table? Like, what is it made of? Like, let's say scientists today, they would say, oh, it's made of matter. But interesting enough is that scientists today, they have no scientist has ever found matter. They could never prove that matter exists for that fact. So the answer here, what is the substance of the table, is in the first step, it's made of the seeing, the hearing, so the sense perception. And the second step is, how do you know you perceive? And you know it by awareness. So what is the substance of the table? Ultimately, it's awareness. So why? And it's a very logical thing, because you have never experienced a table without the perception and the awareness of it in your direct experience. And yeah, that's sort of what's happening, how we're perceiving the world. So that's why I said it's just an appearance. It's nothing real. And what's important to see is that it's not like the world is an illusion and you, as the action figure, you are the only reality. No, that's why it's important. You don't look at the world like this, but you go one step back and you see that this one is also an illusion. This is not what you are, because it's also an appearance. And this is a big confusion, because what we usually do is we take this object, which is an object, to be the subject, because we confuse the seeing that's facilitated through this. We take it as a subject because we believe it comes from here, and that's why it's an object. When we see that this is an object, that's why most relationships are so shallow, because it's always from object to object. It's like a meeting of patterns. When people meet, there's one object and there's another object, and then we feel like, oh, this person is so boring, or this is something like, it's not very interesting. It doesn't blow my mind. But it's purely because you approach it from object to object. When you meet 10 men or 10 women or whoever, and you say they're all boring, then it's not because they're all boring. It's because you are approaching them from an object to an object as this body mind. But like a true meeting can only take place when this dissolves, when this identifier dissolves, and you see who you really are. And then there's a true meeting taking place, which is happening in innocence, and it's happening without trying to grasp this pattern or understand this pattern. Then there's an openness, a vast openness. Yeah. that's basically it. So do you guys have any questions, or I'm just checking on Instagram. Was your question about free will answered? So maybe I'll say one more thing about free will. So the action figure believes it has free will, because what happens is something is happening and the action figure claims everything that's happening, that it was the one responsible for it. Let's say a thought comes, oh, I was thinking that. Something is happening, I'm doing an action, I'm moving my arm, oh, I was the one doing that. So that's what's the sense of self is doing. It claims everything. But what happens is it's presupposing what it's doing. What happens is this claiming is just another thought that comes after something that's happening, and it pretends that it was there before and it pretends it was there after. So what I said, for instance, if I let's say lift my arm and say, oh look, I have free will, I can lift my arm as I wish. But this means that this what claims that I can lift my arm, it pretends like it was there before, it's claiming to be there right after, and that's why it's saying, oh look, now I can do this. But even there's experiments, that were conducted by psychologists, many different ones. And what they did is they had people sit in front of a screen, and then there was a red button and a green button. And so they just pushed buttons. And then they always had to tell, at the moment they took the decision which button they hit, they had to tell the conductor of this research, so when they knew they're going to do it. So they knew it, and then afterwards they were hitting it. And so the research showed, by checking the brain waves, that the decisions were taken around between 3 to 7 seconds before the people were aware. They said, okay, now I take the decision, and already 2 to 7 seconds, depending on the research, the decision was already taken before. So that shows, you don't have to believe this research. I mean, you can if you want, if you're like a scientist, but you can just observe your own thoughts and your own feelings. But like, yeah, it's enough. Like, just sit down, observe if thoughts are just coming or going, or if you have any say in it. And then you don't have to believe anyone. Like, you can just see it for yourself. That's enough. But yeah, free will is basically something that it's claimed by the action figure it has. But as I said earlier, if you examine and if you really look at control over your body, over your thoughts, let's say these are two things that are extremely close to who you believe you are, there is no control whatsoever. As I said, we would all just faint after 2 minutes if we were in control of our bodies. We pretend like, let's take one insanity that happens. People say, oh, but I can control my breath. And it's a very narrow-minded approach, or like a very narrow-minded statement, because what happens is the breathing is happening always, even when you sleep. And when we pretend like and say, oh no, but I can control my breathing, it's not control. It's like you try to, you try to pretend to take over control for a little bit. And maybe you're able to stop your breath for 5 seconds. But that has nothing to do with control over your breath. Control over your breath would mean you can decide to breathe whenever you want. You can decide not to breathe, just like that. And you can, that's control. But what happens is, there's something happening and people are like, oh yeah, we're so excited, I can control this. We have nothing to do with anything that's happening here. Nothing. I have no clue what's coming out of these words. Like, you have no clue why you joined this meeting. Maybe you have a story saying, oh yeah, because I joined, because I had to do this and this. But that's just a story that's being told. And it's important to recognize the stories being told and what's actually happening. Because, most of the anxiety that's happening in everyday life is not through something that's happening, but it's through something that's not happening. So meaning, like, you know, you sit there on a Saturday afternoon and you think about what may happen in 2 weeks, that maybe you get cancer, or maybe your your boss is gonna fire you or something. So this is something that doesn't happen, but it's something that's happening in your story, and that you give a lot of reality. And yeah, that's what's, you know, giving anxiety to people, things that are not happening, because we're so obsessed with those thoughts. I give you one last analogy, which I love, which is super powerful in my eyes. So there's a mushroom family called the cordyceps, and it's a real thing in nature. I've seen it as well once in Bhutan. So they're very rare, and the only way for them to reproduce is that they spit out spores, because there's not many of them. So the only way for them to reproduce is that they spit out the spore. They need to find a means of transportation, so they usually get an ant, like a little ant. They The spore hacks into the brain of the ant, so that's actually really happening. It takes over the brain, so it hacks into it. It takes control over the brain. It tells the ant to go to a forest where the other mushroom family is, and then the other mushroom family spits out a spore. It hits the ant and it kills the ant, and another mushroom grows out of the ant. So that's what's happening in nature, you can observe. And I love this analogy because this is exactly what's happening. So what's happening is, um, let's take thoughts as an example. You can play this with many things, but with thoughts as an example. So there's a thought coming. The thought, without hesitating, the thought says, "Oh no, that's my thought," as Benjamin, without seeing this movement of this parasite entering the system, and it says, "Oh, that's my thought. It's about me and it's from me. So you better listen to it." So this is exactly what's happening. We have nothing to do. Like, let's say an immunity for this would be if you, the moment it knocks on your door and says, "Hey, I'm someone from outside, let me in and I will control you," we're like, "No way." But what it does is it comes in and it pretends right away that that's me. That's the only way it can stay, and that's the only way why you listen to it, because it says, "That's me, I'm you." And that's the only reason why this ant listens to it, because it pretends like it's me. And that's exactly what's happening with thoughts. So you see, like, you are, like, most of us are controlled by thoughts. We listen. Why? Because we pretend we are convinced that those are from us and about us. But if you really observe thoughts, those 70,000 thoughts all day long, like, I would say at least 70 or 80% is complete bullshit. Like, complete bullshit for everyone. And, you know, we have this power of saying, "Oh yeah, but, you know, I try not to think negative thoughts." But if you very neutrally observe all those thoughts, they're just like, some of them, maybe they help you open a door, or maybe book an airline ticket. But most of them are just complete nonsense. And we react to them because we think they are from us and about us. That's the only reason why we're interested. Imagine you have, let's say we recorded the thoughts of your neighbor, and we record every single thought, and then the next day you would listen to that recording for one full day. You would lose interest, like this. Like, you would have no interest in those thoughts, because they would probably be just insane and ridiculous. You would probably think, "Oh, I don't know, my boss, he doesn't really like me. Oh, what should I do? What if I lose my job?" Like, you would switch off right away. You'd be like, "Oh my God." But, you know, the only reason why you would listen 24/7, maybe at night you don't listen to them, but the only reason why you would listen all day to those thoughts is because you think they're from you and about you. That's totally insane. But that's sort of what we're doing. And as I said, when you see it from outside, it's like the most obvious thing. But when you're in it, you'll be like, "Oh my God, I need to do meditation." Because it's overwhelming. Yeah, of course it's overwhelming when you listen to it. It's like it's like your temple, you know, you have created a temple in your head and you're praying to the gods of whoever made your thoughts, and that's sort of what's happening. So anyway, are there any questions on Zoom or Instagram, or comments or insights or nothing?
Benjamin, is Marie here?
Hi, Marie.
Hi, thank you for the interesting talk. It's kind of my first time to encounter this kind of idea. I'm just wondering if I extend or extrapolate what you were talking about, that thoughts are not from myself, then it kind of makes me think that then what would make me, as in myself, if my thoughts are not from me, and also, does that mean that I am the same as other people, and that I am not unique as a result? So those are just things in my mind.
Yeah, that's a very good question. Yeah, it's a great question, and I think, you know, it's a great question to ask yourself and really explore it, and because it's a great thing to see. That's what I was saying. You know, what we talk about is to negate what you believe, what you are. So you can always say, you can say to anything that you see and perceive, you can say with certainty, in my experience, that you're not that. And then, as you said, if you're not, let's say, you know, your thoughts, if you're not your body mind, if you're not your history, if you're not your, I don't know, passport, your religion, your skin color, or anything, then what is left? Exactly, that's a great question to ask, and I would invite you to explore that and not take it as a, oh, now I have the answer, but as a living answer, and examine what's left then. Exactly, and you will get many more insights to understand it when you explore it for yourself than if you listen to my answer. I can give you an answer, but as I said earlier, I don't know if you, yeah, you know, when I said earlier, like, you're the formless, it cannot be defined, like God has no face. It's like, you can never know who you are as an object, because you're not an object, because you're the ultimate subject. So with the uniqueness, yes, I agree, you're not unique. Like, you're unique in a way as Benjamin or as Marie. We are unique because every sort of body mind is sort of in a unique shape and has unique patterns. But as what we truly are, there's no such thing as unique, but because there's no such thing as unique, because there's no second. There's only the absolute. It's like you are the absolute, and there's no second which would be able to recognize who you are, because you can only be it, but you cannot know it as something that we used to know as an object, you see? I don't know if that answers your question.
Well, I like it that I'll take it as a living answer. That's what I would like to. Thank you.
Really, that's the most powerful, because, you know, sometimes it resonates with what we say, and of course we conceptualize all of this. Like, we can never speak about non-duality or never about form as who we are, because we cannot define and not conceptualize it. But in my eyes, you know, concepts, they help. They're like pointers to it, but they're never the real thing, because we can never speak about the real thing. Okay, Michael, yes, go ahead. Sorry, Michael raised his hand. Can you?
Hi, Ben. Hi.
Here we go. Yeah.
Yeah, I just wanted to add something to what you were saying. Yeah, that's the initial biggie when I think back a couple of years, to realize that you're not your thoughts, because you might you know, it's hard. Well, it's virtually impossible for the intellect to sort of accept that, isn't it? Because, like, as you said, you're just totally in it. You're totally identified with it. For me personally, It was, I was in a lot of suffering. So some people refer to it as the dark night of the soul, whatever, the whole works. And a thought occurred to me which was, I cannot live with myself anymore. And that sort of created a crack for the light to sort of enter. It might not mean something to anybody else. I reckon you understand straight away what that means.
Yeah, for sure. No, I know.
Because
It's a beautiful example.
it sort of gave the question came. Hold on, who is this me saying that I cannot live with myself anymore? And then I thought, hold on, is there two of me? You know what I mean? That kind of thing. And then that sort of created a crack.
Exactly. And that's
a moment of enlightenment, you could say, that just thought, and then it opened something up within me. Do you know what I mean?
Exactly.
And actually, it was identical to the exact same thought that Eckhart Tolle had in his initial awakening, which he describes in his book, A New Earth.
Exactly.
So, and then I started looking, I thought I need to investigate this. Then that's how progressively grew in a way, in awareness and realizations. Then it became very clear, obviously, quickly that, as you said, nothing to do with our mind. The thoughts were far beyond that. I just wanted to add to what you were saying. I think the difficulty is that generally people find is they need to experience it and how to experience what they truly are. That's the biggie. Once that is done, the rest is sort of will flow.
Yeah, exactly.
I just wanted to share something.
Yeah, no, great. Thank you, Michael. Yeah, exactly. That's a beautiful example, this crack, because for many people, that's not necessary, but many people experience like some kind of accident or a crisis. And that's sort of when this old system, cracks or fails and it's confronted with, some big challenge in life. And that's when there's an opportunity, because in a way I feel that life is sort of designed in a way to be open for this message and to be open to crack that which we are identified with. And for some people it's very easy, they don't have to go through negative experiences. For some people they have to go through, I don't know, very drastic events. But somehow I feel that life is always challenging us on that level, and the tougher we may think we are, the longer the journey will be in a way. Anyway, so that's it for today. Thank you for joining. We usually do those meetings every Thursday and Monday at 7 p.m. Swiss time, like today. And you can also follow this on Instagram under Benjamin Ramakrishna. We do Zoom, and on the meetups you can also see it. So anyway, thanks for joining, and see you next time. Bye bye.